Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you this evening, and what I'll do is I'll go through a presentation that outlines the steps that we follow to prepare the report that's in front of you today. So a lot of the information that I'm touching on will be included in here. One of the first things that we do in this process, from our experience with my firm, we've been involved in more than 60 public works facilities in New England over the last 15 years, and what we've learned through that process is the first step is to really identify what the department does for the community, because they do play a very vital role. And so I thought it would be important just to recap that for you as well as the others that are in the audience today to touch on what this facility will serve. The DPW touches the residents' lives every day by maintaining the safe roadways and sidewalks, including snow and ice removal, to maintaining the town's vehicle fleets, maintaining trees and plantings for the town, managing solid waste, and providing support for the town-wide activities. And they also assist with some of the parks and open space upkeep within the community. But in addition to the Department of Public Works, the Board of Education and General Government Buildings will also be supported out of this facility, and they provide a vital role to the community as well by maintaining town-owned buildings, as well as Board of Education facilities through carpentry services, HVAC, electrical, and plumbing maintenance activities. So quite a bit goes on within this facility. The DPW is responsible for the maintenance and repair of some of the most vital infrastructure of the town, including 105 miles of roadways, 60 miles of sidewalks, street lights, signs, docks, and seawalls. They maintain all of the town's fleets, which include 40 pieces of equipment, vehicles and equipment from DPW, 50 from the police, as well as 47 other town departments, and much more that they're responsible for on a day-to-day basis. It's important to note they're also on call 24 hours a day to respond to the needs of the community for things including the obvious snow and ice storms to windstorm cleanup, which we're all very familiar with this past year with all the windstorms, from dealing with flooding to support of other emergency departments. A lot of people ask, well, why are we talking about a house that's on fire? Public Works will be responding to block off roadways, clean up after the mess, or clear the road so that the other emergency services can get to the emergency needs of the community. So they do provide really a first responder need to the community. I think APWA recently said it best in one of their articles where they indicated that Public Works is really the first responders who are there until the emergency is over. So the facility really needs to be designed to support that operation and really keeping in mind the first responder needs of the Department of Public Works. So why does the town need a facility? That was the next step, and what we really wanted to do was identify what the issues are that are affecting their day-to-day operations and their ability to serve the community with most efficient services capable. And the department's responsibilities really have increased significantly over the years, along with the number of vehicles and the number of pieces of equipment, but the facilities have not kept pace. Back in 2007, the report from Silver and Petrocelli confirmed that the existing facility prior to demolition was not adequate to serve their needs because of the increase in services that the Department of Public Works was providing. They're currently in temporary rented facilities. This facility was not designed with the Public Works and emergency response operations in mind, and we looked at some of the issues associated with that site. It serves their current needs in the short term, but in the long term, it really does not have some of the basic elements that are needed to provide safe and efficient services. The department is working out of rented facilities, which include a temporary trailer due to some of the limited space within the existing facility. In addition, on the photograph on your right, the facility, the main floor area, which serves the vehicle and equipment storage, the maintenance, the workshops, as well as employee facilities, is all accessed through one overhead door. So this becomes a bottleneck to that facility that impacts the operations. The facility itself is not adequately sized to service the entire fleet. As a result, you have a lot of equipment that ends up being stored outdoors, whether it be a plow and all of their attachments. And this is some very expensive equipment. The replacement of one large DPW vehicle could be $150,000 to $180,000. So it's important to really protect that equipment, and this facility doesn't provide adequate space to do that. This photograph just gives you an example of how it's changed over the years. Back in the 1950s and 60s, they were vehicles that were made for one purpose only. Today's equipment is much larger, multi-purpose, with a lot of attachments, so the facilities really need to be sized to maintain, operate, and store this equipment appropriately. These are some of the photographs of the employee facilities, and as you can see in the photograph outlined in yellow, this is their brake area. This brake area is protected by cones on either side, and in the middle is where the trucks travel to park, and right across is where the vehicle maintenance area is. So the facility really is lacking some of the basic employee support facilities. One of the biggest questions that we get when we're designing one of these facilities is, do we really need to put the trucks inside versus storing them outside? I think that's an important question and one that we've done a lot of research into. And we've broken it down into 6 main points. And I'm going to show you some examples of photographs from other communities that we've done through this documentation. And the first being employee safety. If the equipment is stored outside and you have to clean up that equipment, this is what the employees have to do. They have to stand on the running board, stand on a tire, and reach over. So it's really difficult to maintain that equipment, especially if it's raining or sleeting or snowing. Public safety is another important issue. If a vehicle is stored outside, you can't get it started or you have to clean it, it can delay the response times of DPW, and that could result in unsafe road conditions. We know through a series of investigations that just the operations themselves, by putting this equipment indoors, will be greatly improved. Vehicles will start faster, employees are able to do their safety checks faster, load up their equipment and respond to the needs. Also, the protection of the equipment, as I mentioned earlier, is very critical. The bottom photograph on the right shows a piece of equipment that's been stored outdoors for years and just begins to deteriorate very rapidly. And then finally, the stormwater pollution control, noise and air are very important. When the vehicles are stored indoors, any drips that might come from those vehicles will go into a floor drain system and ultimately to a sewer system, as opposed to going into the stormwater system when they're stored outdoors. And then noise and air is an issue because when that equipment is stored outdoors, it takes quite a bit of time of idling to get that vehicle up to operating temperature. I think the best way to show that is with 2 quick video clips. This is a photograph, a video clip of a vehicle standing at the back of the vehicle looking up towards the exhaust stack here. This was stored in a minimally heated garage, 45 degrees, and when we went through to start that up with the operator, this is what we got. You can see it started up right away. There was just a quick puff of exhaust, and the vehicle was ready to go in about 2 minutes once the air brakes came up to temperature. We took that same vehicle, left out overnight in 20-degree temperatures, came in the next morning, and started that vehicle, and this is what we got the second time. So as you can see, because that vehicle is cold, the diesel fuel is gelled, you get incomplete combustion, you get quite a bit of exhaust. It actually took us half an hour to get this vehicle started. So you can see in an emergency response situation when they're trying to get out and repair the roads or ice the road or salt the roads, you're going to have trouble getting some of these vehicles started. Never mind the noise and the exhaust that's associated with storing this equipment outdoors. So the next step for us was to go through and identify really what is proposed to meet the current and future needs of the Public Works, Board of Education, and general government buildings. And really that process involved, based on our experience, we understand it's important that we meet with the staff because every community does it a little bit different. So we interviewed the staff, we reviewed their daily responsibilities, we reviewed their daily workflow patterns, we explored potential strategic approaches to really improving the productivity, and we compared the data that we obtained to industry standards, and then we began preparing programming sketches. These programming sketches were a tool for us to take what we heard, put it on paper, and then review that with each of the individuals, make sure we understood their operation. This is a sample of some of those programming sketches, and they range from office to muster and training rooms to locker rooms, up to larger workshop areas and vehicle repair areas. So this was a result of those interviews, and this allowed us to sit down and further refine the program. Initially, when we completed our space needs assessment, we broke it into the major operating areas from administration, employee facilities, shops, maintenance, wash, and vehicle and equipment storage. We identified a need of roughly 48,500 square feet. That seemed a little on the high side for us initially, and that was primarily driven by the fact that we had 3 departments operating under one facility. So we reapproached our programming analysis, worked with DPW, and came up with ways to consolidate a lot of those spaces and have shared use of many of those spaces. And as a result of that, we're able to reduce the space needs from 48,500 to roughly 35,900 square feet, which is a 26% reduction. The next step was to really compare that to industry standards, and these are standards that we developed from all of those 60 facilities I mentioned, and this basically calculates a range of where the facility should fall. And that identified a need of roughly 35,000 to 42,000 square feet. So as you can see, with the revised space needs assessment, we're at the lower end, but we're within what other communities are doing, and that was a good verification that the program that we have in front of us was an adequate program. It's important to note that once you start heading below that minimum recommended space needs, you begin to have compromises in the operations. Not that you can't compromise, but it's important to note that the way that it's designed and programmed now will meet the current and future needs of both DPW, Board of Education, and GGB. Concurrently with the program analysis, we began the site selection process. And as discussed earlier, we initially identified worked with the committee on the possible town-owned sites and also the privately owned sites that came up through the RFP process. This is a list of the 7 sites that were identified by the committee, which we took to the next step of evaluating. This plan here shows just a general overview of where those sites are located within the town. The privately owned sites are shown in red, up in the upper right, as well as the bottom here, and the publicly owned sites are shown in green. The next step for us through this process was to take those 7 sites and conduct a fatal flaws analysis. This fatal flaws analysis looked at items such as the size of the site. And what we did is took the program that was prepared a generic site plan, which using both the operational requirements and the zoning requirements, identified a need of roughly 4.9 acres to support the operational aspects of the facility as well as meet the zoning. So that became our baseline for the site size. We looked at the location to determine if it was suitable for a DPW facility. We looked at the past and present use. We looked at floodplain, which can restrict development of these sites, as well as the appraised value, just to check on the privately owned sites to see if the price that's being offered was reasonable. Through that process, we eliminated 5 of the sites, first being the Veterans Memorial Park, primarily due to sensitive receptor proximity issues with the abutters, as well as some topography issues in the back of the site. East Industrial Road was eliminated primarily due to the high price at $9.5 million. On top of that, there would be substantial renovations required to retrofit that for public works operations. The privately owned Tabor Drive site was eliminated primarily because the usable area became too small after we took into account the landfill area that existed on that site and the floodplain areas that existed on that site. The School Ground Road site did not meet the minimum recommended size of 4.9 acres, and the entire site was within the floodplain. And finally, the East Main Street site. The usable area there does not meet the minimum recommended site size, actually taking into consideration the drainage systems that exist on the site. And so therefore those 5 were ultimately removed from further consideration. So the next step was to take the remaining 2 sites, the Tabor Drive site, the town-owned Tabor Drive site, and the Northeast Industrial Road site, and begin the evaluation in a more detailed manner. And this involved looking really closely at some of the development opportunities that existed. We developed a 12-point evaluation criteria, and this ranged from looking at the property ownership, to the physical site features, to operational impacts, down to zoning consistency. These were put into a site selection matrix, and this is a copy of the matrix that's included in your report. And for each item, we had an evaluation factor, and then we had a weighted value associated with that evaluation factor. So using all the data that was gathered, we assigned numbers to each of the items, and this is the first 6 criteria, and this is the second 6 criteria. And subsequent to completing this, we subtotal it. And through that process, the Tabor Drive site scored higher than the Northeast Industrial Road site, 74 versus 50. And what this is intended to do is indicate which site would serve the DPW, Board of Education, and general government buildings in the most efficient, cost-effective manner. One of the items that we typically will do is we'll back out these scores and look just at operationally. So we took out all acquisition cost related criteria and wanted to see how the sites compared just from an operational perspective. Can it support the facility? Can it support future expansion? Does it support circulation? And through that, we indicated that Tabor Drive site is at 53, Northeast Industrial Road at 44. So you can see that the gap between the 2 sites began to close when you took out the acquisition cost. But in either case, the Tabor Drive site indicated that through this process that was the most preferable site to support the operations. Through that process, we then went to developing conceptual building and site alternatives for the concepts. And what we did is we took each of those room data sketches and we pieced them together into our major operating areas. We used these building blocks to then assess the potential alternatives on the site. This is an aerial view of the Tabor site, and based on a total of 77 acres, we were really looking to locate the Department of Public Works facility to the southern portion of the site near the property line so that the other portions of the site could be usable for other town uses, whether it be fields, passive recreation, or whatever may be the case. So using this general area for the Department of Public Works facility, we created a site plan and began piecing together each of those building blocks that I just mentioned, the administration, workshops, and maintenance. And we pieced them together on the site through a series of alternatives, and we looked at several different configurations and ended up with a configuration that had more of a linear fashion. And the purpose of that was so that we could really consolidate that site into a linear fashion and reduce expansion to the rest of the site, make more of the site available for things such as ball fields or other passive recreation uses. What I want to do is just briefly touch on the components of the building itself, show you some photographs of other recently completed facilities so you understand what's going to go into each component. The first being the vehicle and equipment storage that we talked about earlier. In this case, we're talking about a very basic industrial utilitarian type building to support that operation. Multiple overhead doors so the vehicles can access the bays. Inside, your equipment would be stored in minimally heated, probably 45 to 50 degree temperatures, with the ability to store smaller equipment as well as the plows within that space. So this achieves that goal of putting it inside. It's very inexpensive space to construct, and it's storing a very valuable fleet and extending the life of that fleet. Second area would be the workshops. These are typically accessed through smaller overhead doors where you can get just a smaller 1-ton type equipment inside. Other support functions would include material storage through some heavy-duty shelving, as well as some workshop space, carpentry space to support that operation. The next area is the vehicle maintenance. This is obviously a very important operation because they are maintaining 147 pieces of equipment within the community. And this has some of your basic support functions that you find in a public works facility today, and that is lifting capabilities to get the equipment up off the ground to maintain it, as well as some other support functions from overhead, tailpipe exhaust that improves the overall indoor air quality, and lubrication distribution systems, and that helps to maintain a clean and safe work environment by keeping all the fluids in a closed system. Would also be supported with parts storage, again, heavy-duty shelving, and then a separate fluid storage room, and this is where those fluids would be stored in a separate fire-rated room with its own spill prevention so that it doesn't ever reach the environment. Another critical component to the facility is a wash bay. This is a photograph of a basic drive-through wash bay. It has a center trench drain with a deep sump. On either side, you can have catwalks so that you can get up high and wash the insides of these vehicles out. This is important because this will help to maintain that equipment as well, because it is storing those corrosive chemicals from salting operations. Washing activities are done with basic pressure washing system where you have your hose suspended from a cable and a simple wand to wash down that equipment. And we're also proposing a water reclamation system to reduce the water consumption that takes place within that building. The final area is the administration employee facilities. This would have your basic employee support functions that wouldn't be located in the garage. We'd have a separate room that would have a place for a mustering area, lunch area. And to reduce space, we'd also design this to be the training area so they can keep up with their state mandated training. We'd have your basic locker, shower, toilet facilities, as well as your basic office functions. There are a couple of support functions on site that are critical to the operation, including the salt structure. This here shown is a high arch gambrel structure. This is a great structure for the operation. As you notice, it's a very high door, and the reason for that is they can actually have deliveries made right inside the structure. And that helps because with lower doors, you have to dump outside, and then DPW has to manage it twice, moving it inside. So this helps to reduce non-productive labor by allowing it to be dumped inside. And we're also proposing a fueling facility, basic pumps, and canopy for that operation. So taking all that into consideration, the next step for us was to put together some project costs. And what we did was we looked at using average bid prices from a similar project that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years. And it's important to note that we are using average bid prices because we don't want to be the low bidder in many instances, and so we're trying to give you a safe number for what it would cost for one of these facilities. So taking into consideration just the DPW facility as it exists on the site shown earlier, the building costs roughly $6.1 million, which is approximately $170 a square foot. We broke out some of the other components that are not typical for many other buildings, such as the industrial support equipment and the fueling, so the $325,000 and $390,000, as well as the site development support structures. And in this case, site development is going to be your paving for heavy equipment, stormwater management systems. We have open canopy storage to get the sander bodies out of the weather, as well as the salt sand storage structure. We're carrying in all of this estimate as a whole about $1 million in contingency because of the early nature of the project. So we have design contingencies, and that's to account for items that we haven't really been able to flesh out through the design process, as well as construction contingencies. So when you factor in the other owner soft costs, such as the architectural and engineering fees, printing of bid documents and advertising of the project, furnishing it, the total project cost for the Public Works facility and associated site components are $9.8 million. Associated with the Tabor Drive site is what we're referring to as the off-site and shared site improvements, and that is to bring roadways into the site to support that operation of Public Works, but also to serve as the infrastructure to support future development of that site. And that includes a west site access road and an east site access road. This east side access road would be an emergency access out to Pine Orchard, as well as some off-site improvements. Tabor currently has an area that floods, so we're proposing to repair that as part of this project. And also some east off-site improvements, which would be where the emergency access road would connect Pine Orchard, just leveling off where the road comes up to the main intersection. So with that and the design contingencies, it's approximately $1 million more of off-site and shared improvements for a total of 1.1 on the off-site and shared, a total of 10.9 for the two combined. So again, these are average bid prices, and over the last 3 years, we've seen the low bids coming in anywhere from 8 to 10% below the engineer's estimates, primarily because we're in a really good bidding climate. We haven't seen a change to that yet. There's expectations that it will change, but at this point, we're seeing that it's been pretty flat and steady. A couple of points that we just like to make as we go through this as to why you shouldn't wait and why you should move forward with a project of this type is the DPW staff, if they don't move, will continue to work out of some substandard conditions. We talked about the center door, only one door into that space. The building now has no floor drains, so when you bring the trucks in after a snowstorm, you get 30 gallons melting off of each truck, so it's quite a bit of work to maintain that space. So the employee safety becomes an issue because you're dealing with wet, slippery environments that aren't draining properly. It affects the ability to provide efficient services to the community because of some of the substandard conditions, but more importantly, you lose out on the chance to fund this project when the borrowing costs and the construction costs really are at their historic lows. There's a lot of benefits realized by a project of this type, and I think it's important to close with some of those, and these are just a few that we've identified. First and foremost, you'll protect this multi-million-dollar investment you have in this equipment. We've seen that vehicle life expectancy can go up anywhere from 3 to 6 years by putting the equipment indoors. You'll have lower maintenance costs on that equipment when it is stored outdoors. The mechanics end up doing repairs that were unanticipated due to freezing conditions, broken hydraulic lines, and then they can't get to the preventive maintenance. So you really will lower your maintenance costs and extend the life of your equipment. You'll have code compliant and clean work environments for your employees. Much more efficient space should improve the productivity of the staff, which will result in savings and really better service. I think the DPW does a great job with what they have, and I think this just gives them the opportunity to provide even better services. It'll get them out of the rented facilities where you have really no return on your investment, and all that washing that's done on the vehicles will be done undercover in accordance with DEP requirements, and again, that washing will extend the life of that multi-million-dollar fleet as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Kurt to finish up.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Before we move on to the recommendation, I just want to take an opportunity to publicly thank the committee, who are many community members here tonight, along with the Public Works employees who were valuable in the information that they gave in this process to help Jeff come up with this program. The committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Selectmen adopt the recommendation to proceed with a plan to design and build a public works facility at the town-owned Tabor site, and to direct the Public Works Director, with this committee's assistance, to proceed to the Board of Finance and RTM for their approval in moving this project forward. We've come to the end of our charge. You have before you the completed report, and we look forward to coming back and addressing any concerns and questions that you, as well as the public, may have. Also, there's a copy of the finalized report will be on record at the town clerk's office for anyone else to review it. And again, we welcome the input, and we appreciate the opportunity to submit this report this evening.